Okay, so this is the second half of lesson 12. We are still rounding decimals. So we are talking about when numbers are halfway in between two numbers, they round up to the larger number. So if I take a look at the number 7.5, and if I were to have a number line, and I had 7 over here, 8 over here, 7.5 is in the middle. So he is halfway in between. If I was rounding to the nearest whole number, anything from 0.5 over gets rounded up. So he would round up to 8 to the nearest whole number. Okay, so that's rounding. Now we rounding to the 10th, that's rounding one decimal place. So when we round, we always have to look at the number after that number. So here is an example. I've got the numbers 2.12, 2.28, and 2.44. And this number line is showing us it's counting by 0.2s. So this is going like this. So this is 0.12, 0.14, 0.16, 0.18. Okay, so on the next ones, this is going to be 2.22. This is going to be 2.24, 2.26, and then 2.28. We can see where it is. So they're counting by twos is what's going on. So they're showing you what's going on with what they're adding. Now we're going to round. So which number are they closer to? Well, if I take a look at this guy, who is he closer to? Halfway is going to be right here. Is he closer to halfway? No. He's closer to this guy. He's closer to 2.1. So another way to look at that is to look at the second number. What's the number after the digit 1?
2.
It's a 2. And the 2 is between the numbers 0 and 4. And if it's between 0 and 4, that means we stay the same. We round down. So if I round down, what that means is it rounds back to the nearest number. So he would be rounding to 2.1. So this guy rounds to 2.1. Now I'm going to look at the second number, that 2.28 up there. So 2.28, halfway is right here. He's over half. He's on the right-hand side of halfway. So he's going to round up. What is he going to round up to? Who's he closer to? 2.3. So this guy rounds to 2.3. Now, if we did not have a number line to look at, we could look at the digits. So look at the digits. We don't have to look at a number line. So if I look at the 8 is between 5 and 9. So the 8 is going to make the 2 become a 3. That's how we get 2.3. So it's going to make that number round up. He's going to add 1. Now let's take a look at 2.44. 2.44 is not halfway. He is less than halfway. So he's going to round down to 2.4. Now let's take a look and do it with just the digits. If I look at just the digits, I'm going to look at the digit that is second. That digit is between 0 and 4. Anything between 0 and 4 means those numbers disappear, so they will cut off the end. So I will just cut them off, and then you leave the 4 there. If the number was 5 or bigger, you would add 1 to the 4, and it would become 5. Okay, that's the difference.
So it's like rounding, but number line rounding.
Yes.
Pac-Man rounding.
Yes, so there's number line rounding, definitely. So let's take a look at the 100th now. If we round to the nearest 100th, same idea. We've got this number right here, 4 decimals, 0, 5, 3, and we want to round to 100th. So now we're counting by 0.01. So this guy's going to be 0.05. And what is it? 0.51, 0.52, 0.53. So what we're looking at is, where is he? Well, he's closer to this guy. Let's do it with the digits. If I do it with digits, we look at the third number. That third number is between 0 and 4. So that means those numbers just cut off the end. So it would round to 4.05, which we are showing right here. He's going to round to 0.5 right there, to the 4.05. So you can use your number line, or you can just use the digits themselves. Now, if you're using only the digits, whatever place value they want you to round, you have to look at the guy right next to him on the right. You don't look at the left, you look at the guy on the right. So let's try one without a number line. So here's an example. We're going to round the number 6.437. Actually, let's go 487. Let's do that. All right. I have 3 digits. I want to round the nearest hundredth. So if I want to round that, that's called 2 decimal places. Whenever something says it wants to round to 2 decimal places, that means it wants to see 2 digits after the decimal. That's money. Okay, that's dollars and cents. That's our dimes and pennies. So we want to round to 2. That means we look at the 3rd number. So this means I'm looking at this number. Now that 7, he is between 5 and 9. If he's between 5 and 9, what happens?
He goes 10. He's high. He's 5, so he goes 10.
He doesn't go to 10. He's going to make the other number before him add 1.
Sorry.
He's going to make him add 1.
I was trying my hardest to get that right.
So he's adding 1, okay?
So it's a multiplier by 1.
He's adding 1 because he is between 5 and 9.
Yeah.
Okay, so 7 is between the number 5 and 9. So the numbers at the end disappear, and you add 1 to the 8. So this is going to become 6.49.
What?
Okay, so the 7 is between 5 and 9. If that number is between 5 and 9, it's going to make the number in front of it add 1. If the number, like before, is between 0 and 4, it's going to do nothing to that number. It just cuts the other numbers off the end. Okay, so it'll just chop the numbers off the end. It doesn't add 1 to the number, but it will add 1 to the number if the number is between 5 and 9. Okay, now we're going to look at adding and subtracting decimals. The most important thing with adding and subtracting decimals, again, is to line up.
Oh. And the round. Is rounding one? Sorry if I guessed it wrong.
So we are going to line up the decimal places. That's what we're actually doing. We're lining up the decimal places. And that's how you're going to add straight up and down.
Are you still?
So now back to the video here. If we have our adding and subtracting, you will always be able to use a calculator. Always. So if you have a question and you're adding, you line them up. So with these ones, I'm lining up where the decimal is. Once I line up where the decimal is, then I add them starting on the right. I add and I go to the left. So that's something really important you need to write down, is we start on the right and move.
To the left.
Yes. We move left, whether we're adding or subtracting. So we're starting on the right and we're moving to the left. So we add the first 2, we get a 5. I add the next 2, 3 and 5, I get an 8. I put my decimal where it belongs. And now I'm going to add these 2. 8 and 2 make 10. So that means I'm adding a 1 up here because I can only put 1 digit down. So I'm going to put the second number, the 0 of the 10. So the 0 goes here. And then I'm adding 1. That's how they're getting the 3. Because otherwise I just have 2 single 1s there. 1 and 1 make 2. So how did they get the 3? Because they have that plus 1 up there. That's where it comes from. The same thing's going to happen when we subtract. So if I take the first 2, I'm going to subtract those. 4 subtract 1 is 3. I move to the next 2. 8 subtract 5 is 3. I move to the next 2. 8 subtract 4 is 4. And then 3 subtract 2 is 1. Sometimes you have to borrow 1 from another number. But we're not going to have to worry about that because we always get to use a calculator.
Why?
So, because you always have to use a calculator. You're allowed to use them. All right. So, if we add and subtract with drawings, okay, so turn your page. We're going to add and subtract with drawings. If we add and subtract with drawings, all you're literally doing is adding the squares that are shaded and shading all of them on the larger one. So you would shade all three amounts. So you would shade 30, you would shade 45, and you would shade 2. And you would shade all of them. 30, then 45, then 2. And you'd add them all up and see how many you end up with. Okay, so now we're going to multiply. It says multiplying and dividing by 10, 100, and 1,000. These ones can be easily moving decimal places. So when you multiply by 10, when you multiply, you move the decimal to the right. The exact amount of spaces as zeros. So the same amount of spaces as zeros.
I'm so sorry.
So when we move them according to the zeros, here I have 1 0. I'm moving my decimal to the right one place. My decimal will hide on the right. The next one I have 2 zeros, so I'm going to move my decimal 2 places to the right. So then I will have 1 0 at the end. 3 zeros, I move my place 3 times. When you move your decimal, you must put zeros for place values.
I think it's like the money thing where you have to have
Yep, exactly. Zeros as placeholders. Okay, so you need zeros as placeholders. All right, turn your page, please.
page.
Dividing, instead of moving to the right, we're going to move it to the left. So now we move left. Same number of spaces as zeros. So same rules. So same amount of spaces as zeros. Okay, so if I'm dividing, and again, if you don't know where your decimal number is, your decimal is always hiding on the right. If you don't see it, it's hiding on the right. So all of these have decimals that are hiding on the right if you don't see it. Okay, so our first number, the number 2, has a decimal hiding on the right. 1 0, I'm going to move the decimal back once. 2 zeros, I'm going to move the decimal back twice. So if my decimal goes there, this is where you need to put that 0 for a placeholder. That's why they've got that 0 right here. Okay, so you're going to put zeros as placeholders. Same thing if you're going for 3 spaces. 1, 2, 3. This time I need to put in 2 zeros as placeholders. So it is important to put the zeros in as placeholders, otherwise you'll get the wrong place value indication. All right, now we're going to round these guys. If we multiply and divide them, we need to know how to round them. So again, you're allowed to use your calculators. This one's saying take 13 times 15. So they're actually giving us a decimal number. They're saying 12.5 times 15.24. They're rounding them to whole numbers for us so that we can just check and see what an approximate number should be. So we're trying to estimate our answers, which means we're taking a guess. So here, 5 is going to make that guy round up to a 13. That's where they get 13 from. But the 2 is between 0 and 4, which means it's not going to round the 15 up. The 15 stays the same. That's why the 15 here, it stayed the same. So if I take 13 times 15, I get 195. That's what they're showing us here. So that's what my answer should be around. My answer should be around that a little bit. Now we're going to actually multiply it in the calculator. So if you multiply it in your calculator, you're going to get this number. Now we need to know why the place values are the way they are. Okay, so now if I was going to multiply these numbers, let's take a look. We're going to do pencil and paper method on the next page. So last page of notes, pencil and paper method. How do we do it if we don't have a calculator? Well, we have to do it a specific way. We count the number of decimal places. So this guy has 2 digits to the right of the decimal. This guy has 1 digit to the right of the decimal. So that means our answer is going to have the same number of digits to the right of our decimal. So 2 plus 1 makes 3. So that means there's going to be 3 digits after the decimal in our answer. So when we're multiplying, same is going to happen when we're dividing, we subtract. When we're multiplying, we add the number of decimal places. So for example, here's another one. If I've got 3.65 times 1.43, this guy here, the top one has 2 decimal places. This guy has 2 decimal places. What that means is you can see 2 digits on the right of the decimal. So I add 2 and 2, what do I get?
8, 4.
4. So that means my answer is going to have 4 digits after the decimal. Okay, that's what it's telling me. So if we take our calculators and we multiply that decimal, 3.65 times 1.43, we're going to get a big number. We're going to have 5.2195. So, like we said, you count the number of decimals. Okay, so count the number of decimal places. And that's the total number of decimal places or digits after your decimal in the answer. So 2 plus 2 is 4. I have 4 digits after my decimal. Let's take a look at dividing. Dividing is going to be very similar. Pencil and paper method, we don't need to focus on very much. Dividing is the one we need to focus on. So when we're dividing, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to use the calculator though. So if I use the calculator and I go 3.6 and I divide by 2, everybody use your calculators. You're going to get 1.8. Okay, that's a different example. It's a different example. Now, count the number of decimal places. In the first one, I have 1 decimal, 1 digit after the decimal. In my second number, I have 0 digits after the decimal. I have a hiding decimal. So what do you notice in my answer? I've got 1 digit after the decimal. Okay, it always uses the least amount when you're dividing. All right, take a look. When we take a look, I'm going to do a different example on this one. I want you to try this question. We're going to go 4. No, we're going to go 84.62 divided by 7.3. Okay, so we're going to try that. And I want you to count the decimal places. 84.62 divided by 7.3. Okay, what are we noticing? We're going to get a big long decimal. We're going to get 11.59178, yada, yada, yada. When we're dividing, we want the least amount of decimal places. So here I've got 2 decimal places, 2 digits after the decimals. Here I've got 1 digit after the decimal. So what am I going to use? 1, the least amount. So when we were multiplying, we added the number of decimal places. That's how many digits were after my decimal. Now when I'm dividing, I want the least amount of decimals. So 1 digit is the least amount. So I'm going to have 1 digit after. So that means I need my 9 is going to round my 5. Now is my 5 going to add 1 or stay the same for rounding? What do you think?
I was wondering if when we do this, can you help me? Because I'm kind of confused.
So what does the 9 make the 5 do? Is he going to make it go up or stay the same?
It's going to go up.
He is going to go up. He's going to add 1. So we're going to add 1 to our 5. and then the rest of the numbers disappear. So now my answer will be 11.6. This ends the lesson on decimals and their operations.